Good evening and welcome to the Monday, March 28th, 2022 Planning Commission and Commission for Citizen Involvement meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order now. Iris, would you please call the roll?
Buchanan is not yet here. Heap?
Here.
Leak is not yet arrived. Pepe?
Here.
Phillips?
Here.
Rigby?
Here.
Thank you.
And Stewart's excused.
Thank you, Iris. We have quorum, so we'll go ahead and get started, and I think some of the other commissioners may be joining us here shortly. First on the agenda was a council update. Councilor Manns indicated to us that she's traveling. She did share some notes with us that she recommended that folks that were interested in what was going on with demolition, that they watch the council meeting for any updates that folks may want to have on the demolition work. And then she'll be back with us at our first meeting in April. So we look forward to hearing an update from Councilor Manns in April. Next on our agenda is item number 4, public comment. This is regarding issues not on the agenda. Iris, was there anyone who wished to make a public comment?
No.
All right, so we'll move on. Next, item number 5 on the agenda is Commission for Citizen Involvement, general updates. We did get 2 updates that were sent into the Plan Commission. And maybe just one, it's the Westridge and Blue Heron Neighborhood Association. Their general meeting is Wednesday, April 20th, 2022 at 7 p.m. It will be on Zoom. So if anyone wishes to attend, they can email info.blueheronneighborhood@gmail.com. Again, that's info.blueheronneighborhood@gmail.com. They plan to talk about response to House Bill 2001, background on the state rules and guidelines, process and council direction, current proposals, potential future housing policy work, and Q&A discussions and next steps. So they invite everybody to attend their neighborhood association general meeting. Again, that's Wednesday, April 20th, 2022 at 7 p.m. And email to info.blueheronneighborhood@gmail.com to get a link if you're interested in attending. So that was all the Commission for Citizen Involvement general updates that we had. We'll move on to item number 6 on the agenda. Item number 6 on the agenda are the minutes from February 28th, 2022 and March 14th, 2022. Commissioners, are there any changes, clarifications that commissioners wish to make on either of those minutes? None? Motion to approve the February 28th, 2022 and the March 14th, 2022 minutes?
Make a motion that we approve them.
Second.
Commissioner Leak made a motion to approve. Vice Chair Pepe seconded the motion to approve the meeting minutes from February 28th, 2022 and March 14th, 2022. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Any abstains? None. Any nays? None. The minutes are approved. So we'll move on to our next agenda item. This is agenda item 7, public hearing. This is the Community Development Code Amendment to Table 50.04.002-1, Special Street Setbacks, LU 22-0004. Public testimony is accepted. The Commission will hold a hearing to consider an ordinance amending Table 50.04.002-1 of the Community Development Code to remove the special street setback requirement from a section of public right-of-way on South Shore Boulevard between Lakeview and Blue Heron Road. All other setback requirements are to remain. The staff coordinator is Evan Fransted, senior planner. Evan, would you like to give us an introduction, or Attorney Boone, would you like to?
Yeah, I'll go through the hearing procedure. This is the time set for the public hearing as you've announced, which is a legislative decision, which is a policy decision within the discretion of the City Council. The Planning Commission will review the legislative proposal and make a recommendation to the City Council. Although a legislative decision is discretionary, it must also comply with any applicable state law, as well as any applicable statewide planning goal or administrative rule adopted pursuant to ORS Chapter 197. Legislative amendment to the Community Development Code must also comply with any applicable provision of the Lake Oswego Comprehensive Plan. Public hearing process will be first a presentation by staff, then testimony by members from the public, individuals allowed up to 5 minutes, recognized neighborhood associations, homeowner associations, government agencies, or other incorporated public interest organizations will be allowed up to 10 minutes. Time limits do not include time spent responding to questions. Testimony by attorneys, representatives, and witnesses on behalf of which are part of the presentation by a person shall be counted within that person's time limit. At this point, I would ask the commission members to please declare if you have any financial conflicts of interest. Commissioner Leek?
I have no financial conflicts of interest.
None?
No conflict.
And I see none declared. With that, Senior Planner Evan Fransted with the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Boone and members of the commission. And I also have with me Erica Rooney, the city engineer, to help answer any questions if we have them. Iris, can you bring up my presentation? Thank you. Okay, so what we have before us tonight is potential code amendments to Special Street Setback along South Shore Boulevard. So the process, the hearing tonight would be the first evidentiary hearing. If it's tentatively approved, it will go to the next PC meeting for the adoption of the findings on April 11th, and then it'll be sent to a city council hearing on May 3rd. And if they approve it, then the ordinance would be adopted on May 17th, and eventually would be effective on June 16th. Okay, so special street setbacks. The purpose, as stated in the code, is to ensure an adequate front yard setback is available in the event of possible future street improvements, such as additional lanes, pedestrian and bicycle facilities, transit facilities, drainage management improvements, lighting, and street landscaping. It's also important to point out that special street setbacks is a minimum dimensional standard that cannot be modified through variance process either in the Community Development Code or in Chapter 42, Streets and Sidewalks. So if there's a building that's located in a special street setback, they cannot get a variance to locate it there. There's no exceptions. So what we have before us is a special street setback along South Shore Boulevard is 40 feet measured from the street center line. This affects approximately 54 properties and 21 structures abutting South Shore Boulevard between Lakeview Blvd and Blue Heron Road. The Transportation System Plan generally identifies an ultimate right-of-way width between 60 to 80 feet for major collectors, including South Shore Boulevard, depending on whether they include medians or on-street parking. Proximity of existing housing along this section of South Shore Boulevard precludes the idea of extensive widening being a viable option for future cross-section, as the removal of homes, garages, and boathouses will be too costly and impactful to the character of the neighborhood. Engineering staff has studied this section of the street right-of-way and finds the existing 60-foot right-of-way can accommodate future pedestrian transit and bike improvements that may be planned in this segment of roadway. The proposed amendment does not affect compliance with the Transportation System Plan nor metro or state requirements. Therefore, the special street setback of 40 feet is not necessary to assure an adequate front yard setback. It's available for future street improvements for this section of South Shore Boulevard. To help illustrate how we measure this, because I'm sure that's a question you'll have, here's a site plan for a proposed residential remodel. It's a property on the corner of Grafe Circle and South Shore. The highlighted area, that's the 40-foot special street setback. So it's measured from the street center line. And then you'll see an 8-foot red. If I can get this to work. Okay. No. So the 8-foot measurement right there, that's how far it projects into the property. That's where you measure the street side yard setback, which is 20 feet for this property along South Shore. So altogether combined, it results, so you have 20 foot of the special street setback plus the 8 is a total setback of 28 feet. The existing dwelling is non-conforming to this combined setback, but would comply if the proposed amendments are passed. And here's proposed amendments. It's pretty simple. So this is table 50.04.002-1. We would add a sentence in there that lists South Shore Boulevard has 40 feet right now. The bold and underlined language for one sentence that's set between Lakeview Boulevard and Blue Heron Road. So just one sentence added to the code. And that concludes my presentation. Staff is recommending approval of these amendments. They comply with the comprehensive plan goals, metro state requirements, and recommend approval with review of findings and conclusions on April 11th. So we'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Phillips, would you like to ask your questions?
I'm sorry that you have to deal with somebody that's not an expert in code, okay? But when I'm reading this, the math just simply doesn't add up to me. But I understand it probably is, I'm sure it's correct, but I guess I'll ask the question a certain way, okay? From reading this document and reading through the present, it appears that the homeowners are happy that you're doing this. Is that correct?
We have not received any public comments.
Okay, so that means they're happy, okay? So if they're happy, it's hard for me to argue, but from a resident of Lake Oswego, I also read this, the way I understand it, is that if a new road, new lane needs to go in, any city, just anything that you've covered in this presentation, there's setback there to take care of that already. So removing this particular special setback is not going to be a problem. You're not going to have to tear down somebody's house to put in another road. Is that correct?
Can you go back and put that graphic on our screen again?
Yeah.
This one?
Yeah.
Commissioners, okay. Commissioners, I'm Erica Rooney, city engineer. There's already 60 feet of right-of-way out there today, and we believe that the 60 feet of right-of-way is sufficient for any kind of improvements we might need in the very foreseeable future. If we needed to put in a left turn lane, or if we wanted to add pedestrian facilities or bike facilities, we believe that it can all be done within the existing right-of-way. What the Special Street Setback does, or was intended for, I should say, was to anticipate maybe needing even more right-of-way. So we don't think we need an 80-foot right-of-way through this corridor for the future cross-section of whatever that might be on South Shore. I don't anticipate any major road improvements in the near future, foreseeable future. We believe that this will be sufficient the way it is today without further hindering these properties. And you can see on that, if you go back to the map, yeah. We would have 24 buildings would be affected by having them, by keeping the 40-foot setback. 24 existing buildings. So any modifications to those buildings would fall under this current code and be problematic for them. We don't see a need to have the whole 80-foot. We think that the 60 feet that's out there today is sufficient.
Attorney Boone?
Well, I would just add that the purpose of the special street setback is not to sort of make a no construction zone for property owners, so that we might at some point in the future come along and develop it with a roadway. If the city decides to expand the road, it's going to have to acquire the property through purchase, condemnation, et cetera. The purpose of the special street setback is to assure if that roadway were to be expanded, that there's a front yard to the property that's relative to the zone, okay? So the consequence of this, I think, is should a roadway be developed, then you're going to have a lesser front yard available to the property owners. And that's the trade-off, if you will. So rather than 25 feet or 20 feet for a special street side yard, it might be 12 feet, for that 8-foot thing.
Okay, I think you've answered my question. Just one more comment and then I'll let this go because I don't think it deserves a lot more of my attention. But so basically because Lake Oswego is built out already, you don't foresee a massive building or influx of people in this particular area that's going to require massive road changes and all this sort of thing. Just not foreseeable at least. But if something like that should happen, the city retains the right to, hey, I got to pull up your flower bed and put another sidewalk in there, guys. Is that, am I about right there?
Yes, the city always has the legal right to acquire, by purchase or condemnation, additional right-of-way for public purposes. The consequence is they have less land, they get paid for that, they get paid for the diminution in value, so it's not just a square foot issue, it's what does that do to the value of the property. And if a property has greater impact because it has a 12-foot front yard rather than a 20-foot front yard, that would be reflected in the evaluation, so.
And maybe just to add on to that thought.
Commissioner Leek will appreciate this comment. I'm assuming that the realtors, the homeowners will be required to tell their realtors that this exists.
That what exists?
That the special setback has been removed, but the city retains the right, or no?
No,
So
the
the
city.
homeowner can buy something and not know that they've got this particular
It's not
circuit.
on your title report,
Right.
it's just part of city code.
Okay.
Due diligence
It's
on
just
it.
Okay.
it's a statutory authority that a city has. I mean, you know, if we needed land for a water tower, you know, something like that, we would try to buy it. If we need land for a park, we would try to buy it. You don't, there's nothing unique about this as far as the acquisition. And Director Siegel, you had a comment?
Yeah, thank you. So all I was going to say is that the scenario that Mr. Boone was describing, where the city needs to acquire additional land for a street widening project, that's beyond the 60 feet of right-of-way that currently exists. So within the 60 feet that is there today, you've heard from the city engineer that we anticipate we would be able to provide any level of improvements that the transportation system plan calls for in that area without acquiring more than the 60 feet of right-of-way that's currently there. So hopefully that helps. And what that means in terms of the kind of the livability or the residential properties along the way, they are required to comply with the current, you know, the setbacks in the code today. There are, as you've seen, probably a number of, you know, buildings along that road that are non-conforming to the setbacks today. But if those properties were to redevelop, you know, completely redevelop with new dwellings, they would need to meet the setbacks, and therefore they would have, you know, that separation from the roadway, with or without the special street setback.
Hey, if the residents are happy and the city's happy, I'm happy.
Thank you, Commissioner Phillips. Commissioner Rigby, I see you have a question or comment.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you. I wonder if staff would be able to talk a bit about what the impetus for this exception was.
Yeah, I can answer that. So there was a specific property with a non-conforming shed. It's an accessory structure that was partially located in the special street setback. And that's when we started to look at this section of roadway, because there's no options for that shed. Like I said in my presentation, there's no variances allowed to special street setback. So it's just a non-conforming structure that could never be remodeled or replaced within the non-conforming section of our code. But for this property was really problematic, a very small pie-shaped property that there's really no buildable area left. So that's when we started looking at this section of roadway.
So would it be accurate to say that this exception was brought about by the desires of this one property owner?
Commissioner Rigby, I can respond to that. No, I think this was this came about because of our reflecting on the situation that this property owner was in, and then upon studying the rest, I'm looking up at you, should be looking this way, you're up on the screen, and then reflecting on existing patterns of development along South Shore Boulevard, and what we found was that it was not a unique situation, that there were other properties that could be similarly affected by this, and so that's how we are coming to you with this recommendation.
When looking at the proposed length, it looks from the map, it makes sense to me, but would you be able to just give a brief explanation as to why this specific stretch was chosen with the end point, the beginning point?
Sure. We did look at what the existing right-of-way, when we started to pull back and look at the whole corridor and saw how many of these, again, shown in red, how many houses were affected, we looked at the corridor from Lakeview to Blue Heron because it is consistent and it's already there. So it's already consistently 60 feet of right-of-way. In a lot of places in town, we don't have that consistency, and we need to get future right-of-way for a variety of reasons, but this seemed to be similar neighborhood character, good break points. Things change when you start to go up the hill to, on South Shore, and things are definitely different along Lakeview Boulevard. So it just sort of seemed like a natural break point, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. That's all for me.
Iris, can we show the graphic again of the properties that was being referred to? Yeah, this one. One of the commissioners asked earlier that there was a particular property, I guess, that initially raised the concern. Can we go back to the previous one that had, what was the property? Was that listed here on the diagram?
It's 3300 South Shore. It's a little tiny property. I can't point on here, I don't think. Oh, there we go. Right
Oh,
there.
there.
You can see how small
Okay,
that is. That property is almost completely covered with setbacks of some kind.
Yes, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah.
It's an interesting piece of property. One question I would have is, actually the one that I'm familiar with, in full disclosure here, I often ride going northbound on South Shore, and it's the northbound side there. In this picture, it would be the right-hand side, northbound side, where the pedestrian walkway is. And I think it's right near Allen and South Shore Boulevard, around where it says 3711, that it's not only bending and curving there, but the walkway comes down to maybe like a foot wide, and you have walkers, coming southbound. The bicyclers like myself are going northbound, and it's just so this would actually help. I mean, part of the testimony that we heard earlier, we're saying that the special setback would actually help with the road improvements, and it would help with addressing maybe some of these pedestrian and bicycle lanes.
The one thing that's complicated out here is that the actual physical road is not centered in the right-of-way. To be honest, if we were to go through and do something of a major project through there, we would need to shift where the road is. So I don't know specifically, I can kind of envision what you're talking about there, but more likely we'd want to shift the road to the south, maybe west, in order to get extra width, because it's all over the right-of-way. Traditionally, you would center the road in the right-of-way. That's not what has happened here. So we'd have to do some major changes if we came through and did a road project of any kind, be it pedestrian facilities or bike facilities.
And I think, that area can be a problem in terms of clearance with vegetation too.
Yes.
Exactly. I think there's laurels that are growing up, and that's the problem. It's just a very challenging area from a sighting perspective to see who's coming around the corner. Bikes, I actually go out in the road there in South Shore.
There's a significant amount of encroachments within the right-of-way regarding vegetation in particular. So again, any kind of project that we would do within the right-of-way would require removal of some of those things, more likely. But we have no plans to do that at the moment. But again, we feel that there's sufficient room to make any major road improvements within the existing right-of-way without affecting the buildings. And that's what this picture shows, is that all of those buildings on there in red would be problematic if we kept the street setback now. None of those buildings could make any modifications, or they wouldn't be allowed to get variances if they came in for any modifications.
There was another question, I think it's rightly pointed out that some of those buildings, and I go back to that 3711, there's actually like, it's a shed, I believe a shed that comes right up to the edge of almost the bike path there. But with the special setback, that would allow them to develop, and potentially it would allow for like a wider pedestrian pathway or bikeway there?
No, they would still need to comply with the street side setback of 20 feet. So it's from the front property line. So, yeah, no, they wouldn't comply with that.
Okay. And then to follow on to maybe one question that Commissioner Rigby had, I think like what you were saying is like, if you look at kind of the problematic area, the one property that's that pie shape all the way up to, it's approximately Allen or slightly after Allen, it seems like the setbacks that going on up to Lakeview are just fine, but that area from Allen or from Canal, south back towards, where you start to go up the hill there, that's the area that's problematic. But again, the proposal here is to go, the entire length up to Lakeview Boulevard. But again, it just appears that, those properties that are north of, Allen and the Canal seem to be just fine. But maybe can you comment? There's concerns with those areas too?
Well, two of those, two properties are already within the 40-foot setback. So those would be problematic. Those two that are shown in red up there on the north or the upper left corner. So again, from a practicality standpoint, there's 60 feet of right of way there. Why would we not apply the same thing in that last little stretch? What we don't want to have is any more, one small piece here, then a setback in the middle, and one, it's just not very
makes sense.
consistent. So we're taking advantage of the fact that the 60-foot right of way is consistent all the way to Lakeview Boulevard.
I guess what was deceiving was that if you just look at it, it looks okay. But when you look at those, 2 or 3 properties that you're pointing out, those are actually problematic because they're in the setback now, as you're saying. So that's a good point. Commissioners, any other questions or comments? I can't see Commissioner Rigby. I don't know if Commissioner Rigby had any more questions or comments.
Thank you.
No, good. No other questions or comments? Is there a motion then? Can we end? Well, first, before we end, let me just ask, Iris, was there anyone who wished to make public testimony tonight on the Community Development Code amendments to Table 50-04-002-1?
No.
So we have no one who wishes to make public testimony tonight. So I'll close the session on public testimony, and I'll ask commissioners, would we like to make a recommendation to tentatively approve LU 22-0004 for the Community Development Code amendments to Table 50-50.04.002-1, ask staff to come back with findings, conclusions, in order for our next meeting. Motion?
Yes. I make a motion to approve what Chair Heap just indicated.
I second.
Vice Chair Pepe made a motion to approve, and Commissioner Leek made a second. Iris, would you call the roll?
Buchanan,
Yes.
Heap,
Yes?
Leek,
Yes.
Pepe,
Yes.
Phillips is excused, Rigby. Oh, what?
Yes.
Phillips, you're not excused.
Yes.
You're here. Rigby,
Yes.
Thank you. The motion's approved. We ask staff to come back with findings and conclusions in order for our next meeting.
Thank you, Commission.
Thank you.
Our next on our agenda is item 8.1. This is the West Lake Grove and Lake Grove Village Center Overlay Design Standards Work Session 2. PP 20-0002. Public comments are accepted. The Lake Grove Business Association will provide an update on the group's progress, including presentation of a refined project scope and initial code concepts for discussion. Staff coordinator is Johanna Haste, a senior planner. Good evening.
Good evening, Commissioners. Johanna Hasty, Senior Planner with Planning and Building Services. I was going to do a presentation tonight, but Ken Sandblast, who is actually going to do the actual presentation, if I can work the word actually anymore into that sentence, I will. But he's not here, so I'm not sure how to proceed. So I'd look to Mr. Siegel.
Thank you. I think we can probably, I believe the commissioners received a memorandum from the Business Association. I think between Johanna, myself, we'll do our best to try to capture, what their intent was. I know it's a work in progress, so happy to, perhaps Johanna, do you just want to kind of introduce this in terms of the process that we're following with the Business Association, please?
Sure. So the Lake Grove Business Association in 2020, I think many of you will remember that, approached City Council to look to amending the Lake Grove Village Center overlay and the West Lake Grove overlay districts, specifically to look at architectural styles, building materials, sustainability, amenities, preservation of trees, street furniture and lighting, looking to build consistency or ensure greater consistency between the overlays. The council back then said, great, why don't you do outreach with business owners and neighborhood association representatives and see if you can build some sort of consensus around specific ideas. And so that work started, and then the pandemic hit and it got a little delayed. But the work group has reconvened and apparently has made some progress on that. Ken, I think, was going to talk tonight about the concepts that they've been focusing on, and that's on the back page of the agenda, just the last 5 bullet points there. I have not been provided any specifics besides what you see here. We've just been, as staff, noting all along that the 2 overlay districts, while they have different purposes, adopted at different times with pretty different neighborhood characters that they're intending to preserve and maintain, do have the Boones Ferry Road corridor running between the 2 of them. It's gone through that major update, and so looking at street improvement consistency there and street furniture consistency is an obvious one. And then also just using the lessons learned in the Lake Grove Village Center overlay to come back and kind of review the West Lake Grove, which was adopted much earlier than that. So the bullet points that you see in front of you are the general areas that they've been focusing. And so I think I hit the first one there. The second one would be looking at the purpose sections. And the purpose sections in both of the overlay districts aren't, they're general statements at the beginning of code subsections to kind of give an idea of what that particular code section is looking to ensure. So it looks like the work group is focusing on those descriptions and making sure that they're reflective of that vision in both of the overlay districts. The mixed-use development issue is not one that I have been aware of in my work as a current planner, development planner, but it sounds like they want to focus on that whole interface between the buildings and the public sidewalks and making sure that those are active. The allowed and prohibited materials lists are very different between the 2 overlays. The Lake Grove Village Center, for instance, doesn't allow hardy plank or any sort of cement fiberboard. The West Lake Grove is actually even more prohibitive or more prescriptive. It's a smaller list. If you want to use wood, you actually have to use real wood, which, as you can see from projects around town, doesn't always weather very well. So I think that they'd want to look at those lists, make sure that they are comprehensive enough, yet still making sure that the use of quality materials is required. And then the last one, the building styles code sections. The West Lake Grove actually has a very narrow list of allowed architectural styles, just 3, while the Lake Grove Village Center allows, I think, upwards of 12. Anything from Cape Cod to Second Empire, which is what you see in Paris, but without the mansard roofs. In any case, I'm not sure where the work group is going with that, if they want to expand the architectural styles in the Westlake Grove overlay district, or if they just want to make sure that the style descriptions and characteristic elements are consistent. But there are some references in the Lake Grove Village Center overlay to a design handbook that we looked at putting together, but there wasn't support for the direction that we were going on that. So it's just an outdated part of the code that they're looking to remove. So that's a very brief overlay. I don't know if Scott, Iris, do you have?
Yeah, thanks, Johanna. And
updates?
Iris just let us know that Ken Sandblast is in the room virtually now, so he'll be able to join us. And thank you for joining us, Ken. I just, we were just giving an overview of kind of the scope and what the process that we've engaged in with the business association, and talked a little bit about your process with the business community and the neighbors. And I just a couple of points I wanted to add on to Johanna's remarks. A few things that you'll notice perhaps that are not on the list, or they're not being amended. There would be no change to develop building dimensional standards, height, setbacks, lot coverage. There would be no increase in the volume or mass of development on a lot. I don't believe they're considering any changes to permitted uses in those zones, and there wouldn't be any change to the permit process. So, and I'm sure Ken can expand on that. We've also outlined a schedule working with the business association for bringing these code changes forward, and actually having a second work session tentatively on the 9th of May. So that's the process that we've developed so far. But with that, Chair, if you'd like Mr. Sandblast to.
Ken, would you like me to introduce you, or you want to take care
Sure,
of it?
go right ahead.
So probably all of you know Ken, but Ken has been working in the city of Lake Oswego as a planner for years. He's currently connected with Westlake Consultants, and he's also the president of the Lake Grove Business Association. He was really instrumental in working on and adopting the Lake Grove Village Center Overlay District. And so with that experience in his capacity in the Business Association, he was a good person to put together and lead that work group, consisting of other business owners and, like I said, neighborhood representatives. So thank you for joining us, Ken. I'm glad you were able to, and I don't know how much of you caught of my brief.
Yeah, thank you, Johanna, for the introduction. And I did hear all of it. I was actually listening to the Special Street Setbacks. I just hadn't been promoted to panelist. That was my mix-up, I think. So thank you. For those of you that I don't know, I am Ken Sandblast, and I have been the Lake Grove Business Association president. It's a volunteer position. I've been doing that for the last probably 4 to 5 years. And then prior to that have been, I've spent probably 2 decades involved out in the Lake Grove area. And it's a culmination. We get a grand opening of the road redevelopment next month. So it's a culmination of a lot of work by a lot of people, including myself and others. Some of us are still out there involved, and that's what we're driving this effort. So as I put in my memo, we have been working kind of off and on over the last 2 years, just given the circumstances with the pandemic, but we have been meeting when we can with a core group of 6 people. And as requested by the commission, when this effort got kind of underway, 3 of them are the Lake Grove Business Association, myself, and 2 others on the board, Mike Buck and Mark Fitkin, who owns property out in the Lake Grove area. The others are 1 from each of the surrounding neighborhood associations. One is Trudy from the Lake Grove Neighborhood Association, Cheryl from the Waluga Neighborhood Association, and Ginger from the Lake Forest Neighborhood Association. So we've engaged people. We've been committed to having engagement amongst the stakeholders out there, again, for close to 2 decades. We have a lot of common understanding and a lot of common purpose. So it's been very nice to have that continue. So that's the kind of the context of what we're doing with and who we're doing it with. And I think the staff did a good job of kind of giving a little bit of the summary. My memo touches on some of it. There's really 2 overlay districts out there, and that's just the way that it's evolved. For those that may not have the background, I'll touch briefly on that. it was in the mid to late 90s when the area that's now known as West Lake Grove, which is basically from the bank west down to the railroad tracks, the road got improved. It used to be known in the early 90s and prior as the Gap, because it was the only section of Boone's Ferry that didn't have 4 lanes. And so at the time that it got improved to 4 lanes, this West Lake Grove Design District was a city effort. And I was on the planning commission at that time in the mid to late, or probably late 90s and early 2000s. I chaired a committee that came up with a plan that was passed through the city council, and that was the origination or the adoption of the West Lake Grove Design District. Subsequent to that, on a much broader scale, the Lake Grove Village Center Metro did its 2040 planning in the late 90s, and then designated the Lake Grove area more proper from basically, again, from about the round table or the bank back all the way up to Cruz Way. Again, finishing up on my planning commission tenure, I was on it for, I forget, 8 or 10 years. We got involved with the Lake Grove Village Center. It started out as a town center because that was a metro designation, and then it became a village center. Much bigger scale, but it used as a foundation the West Lake Grove plan. And so a lot of the concepts that are in those two are very similar. And the Lake Grove Village Center plan is more complicated. It's a very thick book of regulations, and the West Lake Grove Design District is a little bit thinner, but a lot of the same concepts: consolidated driveways, shared accesses, easements, and then a lot of building design requirements, both materials and heights, and kind of design offsets for walls and rain protection and lighting. So with that, kind of as a context, what we've been working on is really the first review of some of the key components of some of the real detailed designs, factors and issues that are involved in those two districts. So we're looking at that in code, and we're just about done. We basically took and kind of focused, and it's been a challenge to focus because it's such a broad set of regulations. But as I heard Scott say, we're not looking at building heights. We're not looking at dimensional standards of lots or even setbacks. We're focused specifically on building lighting, building design. There's a list of materials for those of you that are maybe familiar. There's an actual list of materials that are not only allowed but prohibited in the West Lake Grove Design District, and now that's over 20 years old. So we're looking at that and refreshing it against or proposing to refresh it and update it. In the lighting, we're looking at reflecting more pedestrian scale lighting and some of the advancements there. We're looking at landscaping for drought tolerant planting because, of course, we're in a stage of change here with regards to climate. And so we're looking at those kinds of things. So there's also an element of style involved that was more heavily involved with the Lake Grove Village Center. It got very prescriptive. So what we've done is literally lay those areas that I've just kind of tried to summarize right into a table, and we've tried to look for the consistencies or inconsistencies between those two sets of codes, but limited to just these 5 or 6 or 8 key topic areas. So that's a long-winded way. I've covered a lot of ground, but in a nutshell, that's what we're doing. And as Scott said, we're trying to put a conclusion to our work, which will be draft. We will give it to Johanna and Scott and the planning department, and they will look at it, and we'll work through that in the coming weeks or so. And then we'll be back to see you again on the current schedule in May for a more specific work session once we've got a chance to get kind of a blended effort and make sure that, you know, we've done a lot of code over the years, but we're not code experts like the staff. So we're committed to working with the staff to come up with a draft that's a working draft we can bring you and talk about in real detail. But it's code language, so it'll get very detailed and very specific when we come back and see you again. So I hope that was clear, and I stand ready to answer any questions or clarify anything that I've said.
Thank you, Ken, for the presentation. I think we do have questions. Commissioner Rigby?
Oh, pardon me. It looks like I've forgotten to lower my hand.
Oh, no problem. Commissioner Lee?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. these code changes would only apply to properties as they morph and change into a more modern configuration? It's not retroactive to the giant?
That's correct. Well, no, it's not retroactive to existing development. It would be for new development.
Okay. What about what I think is one of the biggest eyesores on Boonesbury Road, which is the post office? Does any of this have any impact on getting that place cleaned up, painted?
The answer to that is yes. If they redevelop, then they would be subject to some of these regulations. Short of that, we had some of the same concerns over the years, and we actually had I think, regional director of the Postal Service involved several years back, and it actually had them come to a meeting and talk about some of that stuff. And we saw some improvements with cleaning up some of the dead bushes and plants. But in the meantime, we haven't seen much since then. And of course, there's been a lot of construction going on. So the long answer is when they redevelop, but for right now, it's not a zoning code issue.
Is there room for a citizen involvement project to at least paint the place, clean it up, spread bark dust, and work with the federal government to allow us to do that?
I would probably defer to Scott and Johanna on some of that, other than to give you a citizen's input, it's possible, but it would take one heck of a lot of coordination.
Yeah, I think, a group of volunteers could approach with, the city helping make introductions. Apart from the land use planning work that we do here, it wouldn't be a regulatory function, but what you're suggesting is a volunteer effort, and, we're willing to try anything.
Yeah,
that will
'cause
help move things along. It's,
it's a blemish on this beautiful street that we've created.
well, now that the street has been sort of refurbished and recreated, there'll be a little bit more peer pressure on everyone to keep up their appearances, right? So,
Yeah,
we can try to help with that.
I'd work on that with you. Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions? I think that was it, and thank you, Ken, for the presentation, and thank you, Senior Planner Heiste, for your presentation too.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, everyone.
Before I conclude, I just wanted to check, was there anybody that wished to give public comment? No. So we had no one, so I'll close the public comment session. Was there somebody else? Ken, did you want to make another comment, or anybody else?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you. All right, that was it then for the West Lake Grove and Lake Grove Village Center Overlay Design Standards update. We'll move on to the next agenda item, other business. Director Siegel, is there any other business?
Not this evening, thank you.
All right, and item number 10, schedule review.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Heap and Planning Commissioners. Your next regularly scheduled meeting is April 11th, and you have a public hearing scheduled for code amendments to implement House Bill 2001. That is the only item on your agenda. On the 11th, the following meeting on the 25th is also reserved for either continuation of the public hearing or for deliberation on that package of code amendments. Your first meeting in May, we've tentatively scheduled a follow-up work session with the Lake Grove Business Association and staff to go over the potential draft code amendments that they're considering. And then from there, we have actually a couple of dates that we're hoping to get your input on, future meetings and field trips, site visits. At your last meeting, the commission asked if it would be possible to schedule a tour of properties that have redeveloped, that were where demolitions have occurred, and through non-conforming development, there was either some continuation of the non-conforming development or new development came in after demolition. And so we were more than happy to set that up. We probably try to model it after the tour of residential infill properties that the commission, or at least some of the commissioners, will remember when we reviewed that part of the code, looked at some case studies, actually walked the neighborhoods. Neighborhood association representatives were invited to join you on those tours. So a couple of dates that might be possibilities. May 23rd is one, and there's currently no commission meeting scheduled on the 23rd. Of course, you wouldn't have to do this on a commission meeting date. It could be on another date that works for the commissioners and staff. Another date that is open possibly is the 25th of July, and that is a commission meeting date. Alternatively, what we might suggest is that you hold a work session on the topic of nonconforming development and demolitions first, and kind of go over, an approach for the project, including the tour or the site visits, and essentially kind of confirm the scope for that project, and then follow up with a tour so we have some context then for looking at these properties. So either way, we're comfortable with accommodating your requests on that. So in any event, May 23rd would be an opening and a possibility for kicking off this work on nonconforming development with the recent city council direction on how they want to move forward with that. And then on the subject of touring the Palisades neighborhood or touring that portion of Palisades that might be proposed for an overlay zone, we would suggest sometime in June or July. I mean, we can put some dates out there for the commission and also, of course, coordinate with the Palisades Neighborhood Association. But I thought it would be helpful to conduct that tour with the Neighborhood Association and to do that ahead of any initial work session, formal work session that you might have where you're, going over their ideas or their concepts for the overlay, if that makes sense to everyone. We can propose some dates if you like and coordinate that. We can get on our bikes and ride out there.
Yeah. Thank you, Director Siegel. So, Commissioners, any feedback? I think one of the dates for the demolition kind of tour and site visits was May 23rd. Sounded like a good date. Yeah. So if that works, Director Siegel, it sounds like the commission would be interested in.
Okay, how are the commissioners on just scheduling that like in an afternoon? Is that okay? Can folks take the time off to do that?
Should be fine, yeah.
Okay.
Commissioners, any concerns? No? Yeah, it should be fine.
Okay. In the past, we've borrowed the shuttle, the bus from the Adult Community Center to do this, and are there any objections to doing that? I think it seats up to 11 or 12 people, so, if there are 8 of us on that bus, is that a concern? I mean, because if you wanted to, for, mask reasons or otherwise, we could travel separately or whatever you prefer.
It's fine.
Okay. Okay, good. Then
And then-
we'll plan on touring, we'll set up a tour of those non-conforming development demolition sites for the 23rd, and then the work session on that, we'll just look for a date in June to do that.
Director Siegel, I did want to mention on the Palisades neighborhood, I did get some feedback from them. They were actually wondering if it might be possible to tour towards the end of April, like April 30th.
For the Palisades neighborhood?
Yeah, for the Palisades neighborhood.
Okay, yeah, let me, perhaps the chair and I and.
We can work, with the Palisades neighborhood.
Palisades
and see if
neighborhood
that'll
can
work.
coordinate that, yeah.
So we can note it as a request, and then we'll vet it with the rest of the commission and staff to see if it'll work, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And that, that's it for the schedule update.
One more question, it was mentioned earlier tonight in the work session that the grand opening is going to be, sounded like next month, is that correct, for the Boone's Ferry Road project?
Yeah, I believe the project, the city and the participants in that roadway project are having a ribbon cutting or something very small, actually, and
Okay,
not a street fair.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, we look forward to the road being officially opened. It was a great job by the city and staff and everybody involved, all the public input, yeah. Okay, if nothing else, then that'll conclude our schedule review. That was all on our agenda tonight, so thanks, everybody, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.